Before today's video, we want to bring you a message from our amazing sponsor, Hunt a Killer. Are you looking for something fun to do but don't feel like or can't leave the house? Then you have to check out Hunt a Killer. Hunt a Killer is a fantastic subscription service where every month you receive new clues to help you solve a murder. To unmask the killer, you need to sift through evidence, decipher codes, and solve puzzles. It's a bit like an escape room in a box. I'm obsessed with Hunt a Killer, and I look forward to a new box coming every month. Currently, I'm halfway through the latest season of Hunt a Killer. It's so easy to get lost in the game when you're playing because the props look and feel authentic. You can also buy older seasons of Hunt a Killer, so you're bound to find a mystery you want to solve. Right now, just for our viewers, you can go to huntakiller.com/criminallylisted and use criminally listed at the checkout for 20% off your first box. Once again, make sure you use the promo code criminally listed for a 20% discount and to show your support for our channel. Now you just have to ask yourself, do you have what it takes to hunt a killer? Number 3. Rose Haskins. In the summer of 1963, Rose Haskins was 69 years old. She was a widow, and she lived in Miami, Florida, with her 10-year-old adopted daughter. For the past several years, they had heard strange noises in their home. They had no idea where the noises were coming from or what was causing them. At times, they would crawl around on the floor looking for the source of the sounds. But they could not find anything that would explain the noises. They would also hear coughing, but they always assumed it was the dog. Something else that Haskins noticed was that a local yard worker, Gilbert Kennedy, was often running around her backyard. At the time, Kennedy was in his late 40s. Haskins thought she told Kennedy at least 200 times to stay out of her yard. Then one day, she caught Kennedy in her backyard while he was completely naked. He was bathing himself with her garden hose. Once again, she told him to get out of her yard. The one day in early August 1963, Rose Haskins was walking around her property and she noticed a hole in the dirt at the foundation of her home. Haskins suspected that Kennedy might have been sneaking into the hole and hiding out under the house. So Haskins had a neighbor nail a piece of siding over the hole. Not long afterward, on August 3, 1963, Haskins caught Kennedy trying to dig under the piece of siding. She called the police and they came out to investigate. The officers removed the piece of siding and looked in the hole that led under the house. There were half a dozen bottles full of water, 5 suitcases full of clothes, and a makeshift bed. The police repeatedly asked Gilbert Kennedy if he had been sleeping in the crawl space, and he kept denying it. But after being asked several times, he said it was cheaper than paying rent. Kennedy explained that he used to live in California, but he relocated to the Miami area 17 years earlier. His only work experience was doing yard work, and when he arrived in Miami, he found work doing that. But then, about 3 years ago, he ran into financial trouble and he could no longer afford to rent a room. He found the crawl space and he started living under there. Kennedy was arrested and charged with vagrancy. The police thought that Gilbert Kennedy might have been responsible for a brutal murder that happened 3.5 years earlier on December 15, 1959. 55-year-old Ethel Little was being strangled and stabbed in her home, which was 4 blocks from Rose Haskins' home. However, the police concluded that Gilbert Kennedy was harmless. After secretly living in the crawl space for nearly 3 years, Gilbert Kennedy said he was going to move back to California. Ethel Little's murder wouldn't be solved until July 1972, 13 years after it happened. Out of the blue, 34-year-old Vernon Edwards walked into a police station and confessed to the crime. At the time of the murder, Edwards was 21 years old and he lived across the road from Little. Little's murder was not the only murder he confessed to. He also confessed to the murder of 33-year-old Joanna Block. He beat, strangled, and stabbed her to death in her Miami apartment on May 25, 1961, about 17 months after Little was killed. Block was a friend of Edwards' fiancée. They were wed about a month after Block's murder. Although he confessed to 2 murders, Vernon Edwards was only charged and convicted of the murder of Ethel Little. The only thing that connected him to the murder of Joanna Block was his confession. But at Little's murder, the killer left a bloody palm print on a mirror. Edwards' palm print was matched to the print found on the mirror, which was definitive evidence that he was there at the time of the murder. Edwards was sentenced to life in prison in 1972. He was released from prison in July 1990. But he somehow violated the terms of his parole and he was sent back to prison in March 1991. Vernon Edwards was never released again and he died in prison in July 2001 at the age of 63. Number 2. Unidentified Man. Kasi is a town in the Fuka Prefecture, which is in South Japan. In 2008, a 57-year-old man was living by himself in a simple one-story house at Cassia. Over the past year, the man noticed that food was going missing. He assumed that someone was breaking into his home and stealing his food. So he started to make sure that all the windows and doors were locked when he left his home. But food kept going missing. Although he could find no signs of a break-in, he continued to suspect that someone was breaking in and stealing the food. Then finally, in May 2008, the man decided to get cameras with motion sensors installed in his home. When the cameras were triggered, they would send the footage to his cell phone. On May 29, 2008, the man was at work and his cell phone alerted him that the camera had recorded something. He watched the footage and he could see that a woman was in his home. He called the police and told them that a burglar was in his home. Officers rushed to the man's house. They were surprised to find that all the windows and doors were locked and there were no signs of a break-in. The police weren't even convinced that there was a burglar. Then the homeowner showed them the footage of the woman roaming around his home. The man led the police into his home and they conducted an extensive search. In a room that the homeowner rarely used, there was a closet. It turned out that there was a sliding door in the closet. Behind the sliding door was a cubbyhole where blankets and bedding could be stored. When the police officer opened the sliding door, he found a scared middle-aged woman lying on her side in the cubbyhole. The officer got the woman out of the cubbyhole and he looked inside of it. There was a mattress from a futon and several bottles of water. There was just enough room for a small person to lie down in the cubbyhole. The police determined that the woman was 58-year-old Tetsuko Horikawa. Amazingly, Horikawa had been living in the cubbyhole for nearly a year. She got into the house one day when the 57-year-old homeowner left the front door unlocked. She then set up residence in the cubbyhole and lived there for the year. When the homeowner was at work, Horikiwa would let herself down out of the cubbyhole. She would use that time to shower and eat. The police thought she stayed undetected for so long because she was really clean and tidy. She also did not steal anything besides food. The police also suspected that she might have squatted in other homes in the man's neighborhood during the years she was secretly living in the cubbyhole. After Tatsuko Horikiwa was found living in the man's cubbyhole, she was arrested for trespassing. Number 1. Aaron Smith. In the summer of 2002, 38-year-old Aaron Smith was living alone in a townhouse that he rented in Frederick, Maryland. Smith did not want a roommate, but his acquaintance, 35-year-old Robin Lewis, needed a place to live. Smith thought it wouldn't be terrible if Lewis moved in because Lewis could help him pay the rent. But after 10 months, Smith was done living with Lewis. At the end of March 2003, Smith told Lewis that he had to move out because he had not been paying his share of the rent. Not long afterward, Smith went to work, and when he came home, he found Lewis and his belongings were gone. A few days later, on April 2nd, something odd happened. Lewis called Smith because he needed a ride. Lewis worked at a Michael's craft store in Hagerstown, Maryland, which is less than 30 miles from Frederick. Lewis said that he needed to be picked up at his workplace. Smith agreed to pick up his former roommate. But when Smith got to the Michaels, he found it blocked off by several police cars. Smith looked around for Lewis but couldn't find him, so he drove home without him. It turned out that Robin Lewis had gone into the Michaels with a toy gun and robbed it. He managed to steal $6,000 in cash and checks. After the robbery, Aaron Smith did not see or hear from his former roommate. Over the next several weeks, Aaron Smith heard strange sounds inside his home. He would try to find the source of the sounds, but he never could. Then on the evening of May 10, 2003, 6 weeks after Smith kicked Lewis out, Smith invited some friends over to his home. During the evening, they heard some strange noises coming from somewhere near the top of the 2-story townhouse. On the second floor of the townhouse, there was a living room and the master bedroom. Someone noticed dime-sized holes in the ceilings in those rooms. They pushed a screwdriver into one of the holes, and to their surprise, someone pushed the screwdriver back down. Smith and his friends searched the second floor of the home. Behind an insulating panel, they found an attic cubbyhole that Aaron Smith did not know existed. Inside the cubbyhole was Robin Lewis. Lewis pushed past everyone and grabbed Smith's keys to his SUV. He then got into Smith's SUV and drove off. Aaron Smith called the police and they came over to his home. They looked in the cubbyhole and it was clear that Robin Lewis had been living there for nearly 6 weeks. There was bedding, beer cans, and fast food wrappers. He had a laptop, a TV, and a VCR. He had spliced into the cable as well. Lewis even managed to route the air conditioning into the cubbyhole. Lewis also hooked up his laptop to Smith's phone line so he had internet access. Other things they found in the cubbyhole showed that Lewis had been spying on Smith. Notably, he had connected a phone to Smith's phone line. The phone had tape over the mouth part of the handset. This setup allowed Lewis to listen to Smith's phone calls without his knowledge. Lewis had also set up 2 baby monitors in the home, and he had the receiver in the cubbyhole with him. The police suspected that Lewis snuck into the home one day while Smith was out, and he set up residence in the cubbyhole. Over the next month and a half, during the day when Smith was working, Lewis would come down and use the townhouse. He'd also leave to run errands, like buy food and beer. The police could not locate Robin Lewis after he fled the townhouse. Aaron Smith decided to spend the night at a friend's home. The next day, Smith went back home and he found a note from Lewis. It said, "I'll always be watching you." For the next couple of months, the police had no luck in finding Robin Lewis. They also hadn't found Aaron Smith's missing SUV. Smith was understandably freaked out. His employer transferred him to a new location, and he moved out of the townhouse that he had shared with Lewis. Reporters couldn't even find Smith to ask him about a strange experience with his former roommate. Then in late July 2003, about 2.5 months after Lewis fled the townhouse, the police at Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, got a tip that Lewis was working at an ice cream shop in town. Rehoboth Beach is about 150 miles from Frederick. A police officer went to the ice cream shop and he found a man who looked a lot like Robin Lewis working behind the counter. The officer asked the man what his name was, and he said it was Aaron Smith. The officer asked him for some ID, and he said he didn't have any on him. He said he left his wallet with his bicycle, and his bicycle was behind the store. The officer told the man to take him to his bike. They went out behind the store to the bike, and the man couldn't seem to find his identification. So the officer said, "Robin, where did you leave your wallet?" The man responded, "On the bike." Then the man realized he had answered to the name of Robin, but he continued to say he was Aaron Smith. The man was arrested, and the police quickly verified that he was 36-year-old Robin Lewis. Lewis was charged with a slew of crimes, including criminal impersonation, motor vehicle theft, and malicious destruction, among other charges. In April 2004, Lewis accepted a plea deal regarding the robbery at the Michaels store. He was sentenced to 18 months in jail. A few months later, Robin Lewis pleaded guilty to lesser charges regarding squatting in Aaron Smith's home. He was given a sentence of 20 years, however, all but 18 months of his sentence would be suspended. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. We're excited to announce that we're now on Roku. Click on the link in the description box for more information. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.